Hello, Zeteo here. Today we're looking at a replay analysis between AidanNaut and Thunfisch. Thunfisch is, it translates from German to English as tuna or tuna fish. And we are playing on Canis River, so let's get into it. Alright, so we got Aidan spawned at the top center of Canis River here as our Blue Armada player. And we have Thunfisch spawned at the bottom as our Cortex player. I've watched Thunfisch play quite a bit. They're probably going to do a bot Cortex opener. We'll just have to see if that's true or not. But yeah, Aidan looking like he's going to open with... okay, he was thinking about doing a one mechs lab. Decides to go for the 3 mexes. I would say that's definitely a good choice because one lab or one mechs into lab doesn't really do that much for you. You get some stuff out a little bit faster, but by the time it gets there, it's basically the same time. You're really only saving like 5 seconds or so. And I don't think that's going to matter when the commander can basically defend this entire region by themselves. The lab's going to be done. They can just crank out whatever, whatever scouting unit. That's more if you suspect they're going to do some cheesy play and you want to like make sure that you see it coming ahead of time. But yeah, it's going to be a vehicle lab here. Pretty normal stuff other than that. And let's see, what does your queue look like? All right, so it's going to be Con, Rover, Con, and then a bunch of Rovers. So this feels a bit unsafe. Just because it's 2 very, very early cons, but at the same time, vehicle players, or, when you open vehicle, you don't have a lot of metal to work with. And so going out and grabbing those, that metal is very, very important here. So that should be, I don't know, it should be fine, honestly. I mean, unless you expect your opponent to, like, do a bunch of tick pressure or something like that, it should be fine. But yeah, it's good to have at least one scout going out early, whether it be first or after your first con. Just a little scouting is very good, important stuff. Because you want to see how they're opening, see if there's a bunch of grunts running towards you or something like that immediately, doing some kind of rush. You want to know those things, so this is good, of course. But yeah, just 2 cons going out, grabbing mexes, commander staying back at base. This, I would say, is not necessary. At least, at the very least, you don't want it in this spot because your commander can basically already defend that. So if you're going to do it over here, because these wind turbines block the commander from shooting stuff. So, that's going to help tremendously. Plus, I don't know, rovers can do a pretty good job pretty early on, anyways. So won't worry about it too much. Looks like this is idle for a bit. Unfortunately, you don't have anything queued here. It does happen. Obviously, it's something you want to avoid when possible, or maybe, I guess, maybe you're trying to get some more info first, but yeah, it's just gonna get shut down, that stuff over there. So yeah, I'm curious to know if you move out your commander or if you're gonna use move out with a 3rd con here. Okay, so it is gonna be commander, or at least the commander's going out getting some more wind turbines. I guess that's fine. So one thing to note is radar is very important on this map, and it's difficult to get a good radar because of these mountains here. So with these mountains here, like a radar at your base doesn't really get that far, or I mean, it obviously gets that far, like all the way out here, but obviously the mountains block it, so you have to be careful with, just know where your weakness is in a way. I would definitely suggest a radar over here. If you're going to take this spot and expand, taking it here is kind of nice. They did change the radar, so radar can actually see up this on the high ground from the low ground now, but it does still get blocked by the mountains here, so something to keep in mind. Players sometimes elect to go, start in this kind of spawn, just so that it's easier to get something over here to, get a radar to see stuff like this coming. Like right now, you don't see this coming at all because you don't have the radar. Let's see, do you have any radar? Not yet. Okay, that's kind of unfortunate. Because basically, like radar's your early detection system, and without it, you're just going to very likely, very easily lose a con or two. So you're kind of expanding unsafe, or like what you're doing. Like even this con is not really that safe because there's no radar. This con definitely not safe, obviously, because there's units here. But yeah, just to point out, like it's something you do not want to forget, like ever. Like don't like. There's maybe times when you can cut it, but like even throughout the Alpha Cup, like people were missing radars, and those are the people that lost because they couldn't get, you know, units over there to defend. All right, so you're going with pincers. All right, interesting choice. Definitely substandard, but I actually like this choice a lot here. Primarily because pincers, like they do have a lot of hit points, and so they can certainly take some damage from these grunts. But at the same time, looking at that projectile, like they don't miss as often as like a medium tank. So it's like in a way a better choice than medium tank to some degree because of that. You know, they're gonna actually hit the grunts instead of like miss a whole bunch of shots. So this isn't that bad, but at the same time, you're kind of building this more expensive unit when you could be building blitzes. And blitzes, you know, they're not like the best unit in the world, but like having something faster to catch grunts is kind of important. Like these are pretty slow. They're slower than a medium tank. You know, and they're almost as expensive. So, you know, that opens the opportunity for your opponent to do things like run around them into various locations, you know, and that makes it very difficult to actually defend. Now, luckily, I mean, you're being very aggressive with them, which is what you'd want to be doing with this a slower unit like this. You want them moving across the map to, you know, to apply pressure and force your opponent to, you know, stop with the aggression and try to defend them. You know, so this is good. Your opponent sees them. He decides not to send these forward, instead coming back to defend with them, seeing that there's this big push coming towards him. You know, so that works out for you because that keeps him off of your base. But at the same time, you know, a really strong player would, in fact, have, you know, would have enough grunts and stuff out. Like, look at this metal sitting here. If this was all grunts, like, well, I guess the majority of them being grunts and the rest of them being wind or something like that, you know, this wouldn't really work out because they would just have grunts at your base and enough grunts to defend this. So, you know, looking at your metal, you are spending it well, which is good, of course. But, you know, that also means that, you know, what you have built is, like, you're kind of capped on what you've built. Like, you can't just, like, macro better and just have more units because you've spent all your money. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I do like well, actually, I'm not 100% sure, but it kind of looked like you moved these back to regroup with some more pincers. You know, so you kind of like showed pressure, came back, you know, instead of running in the few that you had, you joined up with the rest of them, which is a really, you know, that's of course really smart to do. So you have a stronger push. Like you kind of just show up and say like, hey, I have 5. You fall back a little bit, join up with 2 more. Now you have 7, and now it's that much harder to deal with instead of just 5. So I don't know, I like it. Yeah, so this Geo, you're kind of stalling on this a bit. You're slowing down your production a little bit. I would suggest maybe a few more wind turbines first. Because this is hurting a little bit here. But, you know, it's not the slowest Geo in the world. Like, I mean, what I should say is you're not stalling terribly hard here. But yeah, it is setting you back a little bit. But yeah, okay, so your pincers come in here. And yeah, look at them fighting these grunts. Like they're doing quite well because of that faster projectile is actually like getting the hits in. Yeah, so this isn't too bad. I mean, you know, this is kind of how a stronger unit typically will play out against a you know, faster, more mobile unit. They should kind of crush them like this, and pincers are, you know, like I was saying, a good choice against grunts because of the projectile. Let's see, how are you doing on radar? Okay, so you have a radar here, you have a bot lab here as well, and an air lab. Okay, so yeah, I'm still noticing here you only have this one radar. So not only did you delay radar, you only have a central radar, which means any attack, you know, down any of these other regions is just going to hurt a lot more because you're not going to see it coming, and it's just going to show up randomly. You don't ever want to be in a position where your opponent can ever surprise you like that. You don't want to be like, oh shit, there's units there. You want to see them coming like far in advance. Okay, so second radar is here now. So that at least helps a little bit. But yeah, this attack's certainly going to at least clean up this top area. And now you're going to need to defend that. So this air lab I should also talk about as well. I mean, okay, so one step at a time. Let's pause here for a moment and just talk about these maces before the air lab, because so you went from powerful unit like pincers, you know, and it kept your opponent back. It kind of worked out for you, even though like it might not do that in the future. And now you're going into a strong, slow unit that's even slower, like maces. And they're going to be a little bit more power dense than the pincers are, I believe. But, you know, it's basically the same kind of unit that you're building. You know, and that's going to be good for, you know, like parking somewhere like this choke point. And then like moving down this avenue, and then all of a sudden this avenue is really strong. Or, you know, coming over here and doing the same thing over here, just running down here. But while you do that, you have to be mindful of all these different areas into your base. You know, so this is all, you know, really, really strong for your opponent to do. That they can just harass the crap out of you because of that. So something to be careful of. I mean, going from strong unit into strong unit also kind of challenging for that same reason. It's just really hard to afford enough of them and have them positioned properly to deal with all the different things. So if you're going to do something like this, I would suggest having some pawns, having some blitzes or something to be able to run over to a side and protect it. And that'll just help you a lot more. So I usually would say, like, I'd reserve these more powerful units for like a little bit later on. You know, it's kind of like in an 8v8, for example. You know, you start out with pawns or blitzes or whatever. You know, cheaper, faster units. You can maybe raid with them, but then your front line becomes a little bit more choked up, and then you go into those powerful units. And it's because the front line gets like choked up with towers, with pawns and stuff, that these powerful units are more significant. If you're in a narrow lane, your commander can be like the only thing that, like, commander alone can sometimes be enough to, you know, deter a big raid or something like that, just placing down towers. So, you know, you go into those stronger units a lot faster in an 8v8 situation because it's so choked up. But if there was a situation where your opponent can just circumvent all that and run into your base, like, yeah, then you just go high, you know, heavy pawns or heavy blitzes. So same thing here. You want to have a lot more of those pawns and blitzes so that, you know, you cover those areas, you know, and then once it becomes a little bit more covered, then you can switch into more powerful units. All right, so let's talk about the bombers here that you're making. So this is another like power unit that you're doing that doesn't protect you very well. So while you're building all these bombers, and bombers are kind of expensive. I mean, for an air unit, they're, you know, pretty expensive. You basically are not building a ground force, or you're doing so very slowly. And so this is giving your opponent the opportunity to just have a bigger ground force, which means their ground force can be, you know, in various locations. Like right now, Red really only has these 2 locations, but they very well could have blitzes coming up here. They could have, you know, medium tanks running in here, you know, as well as here, you know, and just hit you from all these angles. And it's going to be very difficult for you to plug that hole with just these maces. So that's the first thing about it. Second thing is, I mean, really, okay, so, you know, you spend all this money on the air units, and you're, essentially, it's like kind of like an all-in play. Like, for example, if Red spaces their wind turbines well and reacts to, you know, seeing bombers, I'm going to unpause now. Yeah, like this isn't, well, it's a little bit spread. It could be more spread to deal with bombers better, but the point is, like, really good players will spread out their wind turbines even further, and then the bombing run, even if you scout and see exactly where the wind turbines are, it's very difficult to actually do damage. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is going bombers right here, right now, is kind of an all-in, because now you're getting so far behind on the ground forces that it's going to be really challenging. And of course, that's going to depend on how aggressive red thinks they can be in the situation, how good your defense is. I mean, you do have some units here. You know, you do have a tower being built, so I mean, it's not the end of the world. Your maces should be able to cover this flank. But yeah, you know, maces can certainly be picked apart by just, you know, splitting some of these forces and forcing the maces to walk and split up into these different areas. Actually, I want to pause here really quick and just check the army value. So we have 27,000 or 2,700 metal in Red's army on this side. And your maces here is 14. This should, I mean, even just thinking about the units themselves, this probably could run in here and destroy this. Let's see, is your commander still here? No. Where's your commander? Oh, right. You moved your commander down there. So yeah, this is basically, like, could very well be threatened, especially if well microed. You know, these medium tanks can certainly take a beating. You know, almost double the health of these maces. And maces being slower, a lot of shots from medium tanks onto them will probably hit. Whereas the medium tank is quite fast and can dodge some of the mace hits. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken... Oh, they do not. Okay, the maces actually have a little bit more range than the medium tank. Alright, so... Anyways, looking over here, you're sending your bombers out now. Looks like you did make a scout. This, I feel, is a poor... Excuse me. I feel like this is a bit of a poor angle. You know, and let's look at your vision here to just see what you know. I don't feel like you actually know this. This might be just like... Oh, maybe you do know that. Okay. I was going to say, maybe that's a graphical error, but... all right, so... well, I guess I need to unpause to show your radar. Okay, so that's important. So seeing, you know that there's these units here. You know that there's, you know, units scattered here. And you know that there's nothing here. So this isn't a lot of units. And I feel as though your bombers should actually just be going and making a beeline to the base. And the reason for that is, if you bomb here, you know, in this location here, and say you do another bombing over on this location, by the time you get to the base, they have a lot more time to get up anti-air. So the bombing on the base itself is not as big of a surprise. And so you're going to do probably less damage because of that. I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but I want to talk about this a little bit. Okay, never mind. I won't talk about that. That's kind of, that's too much of a tangent. Okay. Sorry. Anyways, you want to basically, you know, show your bombers, you know, you want to try to find a path that shows your bombers, you know, at the last second, but you also want it to be towards the base. By attacking here, they should hear the bombs start dropping, and that alone should prompt someone to build a bunch of anti-air. And so it's really easy for them to just have enough to defend. So just something to keep in mind with that. So you want to, you know, unload here and then hit the stuff on the side, because the stuff on the side is less important than the base. And so, you know, it's less important as a target for you, and it's less important for them to defend. So their first priority is, let's put anti-air all along here and make sure that our base doesn't just explode, right? And then, you know, they're going to be thinking about the outskirts maybe eventually, or if at all. You know, so once you hit the base, then you can start hitting the outskirts stuff, and you can start taking out some of the stuff basically for free, assuming that you have the bombers left after the base attack. So, you know, and I would say that, yeah, keeping them alive, or at least some of them alive, to be able to, like, hit some of those outskirts, those outposts, like, would be really strong as well. But yeah, let's see how this happens. Alright, so your scout, unfortunately, is not scouting. Probably just a bit of a micro error here. That's unfortunate. So this bombing looks like it's going to be blind. And yeah, the angles on some of these attacks were I guess this one was okay. I mean, this one didn't really do that much because it, I don't know, it like was a weird angle. But yeah, okay, so you got basically you're bombing this area, which means, you know, like the bomber's gonna drop bombs like this. Let's take a look at what the base actually looks like. Okay, so, you know, you're missing the fact that there's potentially a geo to hit. You know, this is a reasonable, like, blind bombing area. You could potentially spread them out a little bit. But yeah, the scout to me is so very important. And I'll give you this little, like, tip with bombers. And people, like, one of my bombers actually, like, make it to their destination. You know, oftentimes they don't, but, well, in a 1v1 they usually do. But, you know, people say that my bombing does significant damage every time because I do a certain technique. That technique is, instead of doing the whole, like, you know, left mouse drag, like, you know, most people do something like this, right? That's basically what you did here. You know, in this location, you just kind of like spread them out. If you have the APM for it, and if you're doing a bombing run, typically that is where your APM is going to be because it's such a, like, game-changing event. You know, A, because you're spending a lot in bombers, and B, because you can do a lot of damage with them. And C, because they can die pretty easily. You know, this obviously matters, so, you know, obviously your attention is split. This matters a lot too, obviously, because you kind of need to degun. But if you're ever in a situation where you have the APM, what you want to do is, you know, select a couple bombers, you know, pinpoint certain locations, like, say, like, you know, say you drop, why can't I draw? What the heck? Okay, so you drop a bomb there and drop a bomb there. You see that there's the nanos here. You drop 2 bombs here. You know, so basically what I'm saying is spread it out. And, you know, what you can do is, like, say, like, you have all these bombers. You know, you select, like, maybe a third of them and say, like, okay, I want to drop like that and that. I want to take these, drop like that. Or, sorry, drop like that. You know, so that it hits both those nanos. Take these, hit some more wins. Or maybe I hit over here now. You know, just, you know, spread it out so that you don't have potentially wasted bombs. So why don't we see, I mean, yours might be okay. Let's see, from this angle. So, well, let me just do it like this. Okay. I mean, this is all close enough together that you'll basically wipe, you know, this circle out. But if we think about it, like these are where the actual lines of where the bombs are going to drop. Something like that and that. Yeah, I mean, you basically take all this out except for the bot lab. I think. Yeah, the bot lab should survive here. And I suppose you can always, like, circle around and go for the geo afterwards. But if we look at red, they already have a second SAM on the way and a third queued up. So, you know, just something to keep in mind, again, with just, like, you're deciding to bomb these different, you know, areas up here. All right, anyways, let's unpause here. Unfortunately, yeah, the scout, oh man. Yeah, you could certainly have hit this on the first run. Yeah, I mean, honestly, SAMs are, I don't know, I don't like SAMs. They're not that strong. So this Geo is still going to go down. Okay, well, that's certainly going to be a lot of damage. So yeah, I mean, that's significant damage. You have this follow-up with Banshees. You know, nice little way to apply pressure / you know, put on a little bit of defense. You know, and these Banshees, of course, can hit some of these outlying bases and stuff. Red actually built some anti-air here, so that's great for them. But yeah, you shoo away these units with that. And okay, so you're doing that basically 1-2-3 punch of, you know, you're doing some strong push, and then you're doing what was the other strong thing you did? I forgot already. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be, you know, you got, like, pincers and maces, you know, doing a strong frontal push. It's hard to deal with, maybe. And then you go into air, do a bombing. And then behind that, you get some Banshees for some defense / you know, being annoying on the map, keeping your opponent back while you go T2. The bombing run was rather successful, so this is, okay, you gotta be careful here. There's a lot of tanks. But if it, like, so this is kind of safe because of that. If it wasn't as successful, this would be a big mistake because red just has a lot more forces. Now, if you look, like looking at the army value, you're up 8%. That 8% is probably within here. I mean, so yeah, I guess you're about equal, but that's because I think you're just perhaps a stronger player than red is. Or you know, you guys are a low enough OS where it's hard to deal with stuff. But either way, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is challenging because you can't really defend these with these maces because the maces are too slow, right? And now you got Jaguars coming out. So like, okay, so the issue with T2 is A, the lab costs a lot, or the factory costs a lot. And then once you get the factory, it's like, what are you gonna build? You know, like bulls are too expensive to just build up right out of the gate, right? And if you build bulls, you're gonna have like one or two. Jaguars, you know, your best choice, right? They're cheaper, they do, you know, reasonable damage. The only problem is they're really not that strong. And so like a whole lot of medium tanks can still get in here and do a lot of damage. You know, so this is basically, you're basically gonna die here because of that. Now you're doing the same thing on the other side with the maces. But imagine if red just had an answer to that. You know, you'd be so screwed right now. Yeah, and obviously it worked out for you, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that higher OS, that might not work out so well. So I guess I'm just pointing it out as a potential mistake. Because, you know, I guess just something to keep in mind when you're doing that, like, bomber into T2 kind of thing. But yeah, I would think that this closes out the game. You still have a lab. I mean, red might not have... I don't even know if red knows that you have that lab. Okay, so they know that you have... Well, you might have reclaimed it by now, I guess. But either way, red's in so much trouble. So I think this is probably just going to close out here. But yeah, radar is always the first thing on my mind. Like, you can't forget radar. So very important. And then I suppose the number of cons you built was fine. The pincers was a little bit dicey in a way, but it kind of worked because it kept red back and red just wasn't able to spend their money, so it kind of just worked out. And then, you know, the bombers as a follow-up was fine, but, you know, I had issue with how you did it and not having scouting with it. But yeah, it's kind of like a lot of different things that don't really cover your flanks very well. You know, so I want you to keep that in mind as well. Just like, how do you deal with stuff coming up the edges? You know, because a really good player could see your pincers moving forward, you know, and have an attack coming on the sides here from both directions, in fact. And, you know, while you can maybe get up to here, they'll probably stop you just by producing a lot of units. And then it's like you're losing a bunch of ground because the units are in your base and whatnot. So, you know, keep that in mind, but also keep in mind, like, when you transition into bombers and transition into T2 and all this, like, all these things do not protect your flanks. So, something to think about. Anyways, I hope you learned something. And yeah, thanks for watching. And see you guys around.